Great fans get their chance to cheer.
The Pirates are on the offensive. Whizzer White carries the ball.
A long gain on the part of Bullet Bill Dudley, one of the great football players of all time.
The Pittsburgh Steelers, most renowned for their defense, featuring Ernie Stotner.
Record-breaking Bobby Lane, the big man in the Steeler attack, calls on Buddy Dial, and Fleet Buddy races in for a score. Northfield fans cheer as quarterback Bugic sends John Henry Johnson over right tackle. Johnson, who's been hotter than a blast furnace all season, bursts over center and breaks into the clear.
And there's a collision. That's caught out of the air. The ball is pulled in by Franco Harris. Harris is going for a touchdown for Pittsburgh. Here is Bradshaw rolling right and fires into the end zone, complete for the touchdown. Hitting very well in the end zone.
Ladies and gentlemen, the Pittsburgh Steelers are the champions of the National Football League. And he's going to squad and score, makes a circus catch. Unbelievable catch. There goes Stallworth. He pulls it in, and it's a touchdown for Pittsburgh.
Holy smokes, they strike again.
Three-step drop, fires it out to the right. Picked up by Woodson. He's got Green covered. Rod Woodson goes all the way for the Steeler touchdown. Give him the bus off the right side. Cuts it back. He's on his way. The bus is gone. And is back. Ben fires. Deep from the backside. Throws it for the end zone. Hines Ward, touchdown.
Terrific play by Big Ben, who's going to go to Pro Bowl 90 times.
First team in the AFC, history of the National Football League to win 15 games. You have made history today.
Pittsburgh's North Lincoln Avenue. This is where the history of the Steelers begins. In this neighborhood, an Irish immigrant family named Rooney raised 2 girls and 6 boys, including firstborn son, Arthur Joseph.
They lived on the shore of the Allegheny River on the north side, which was called the First Ward. He grew up right on the spot, right across the street from the spot where Three Rivers Stadium would eventually be built.
I was always an athlete. I was a coach. I played baseball and I boxed. I played football. Well, that was my life, sports.
He was a great baseball player. He was a great boxer. He was the AAU lightweight champion. He was chosen to box on the U.S. Olympic team in 1920. He was also a tremendous street fighter. He was somebody that you would call if you wanted somebody knocked out, you know.
Relying on his fists was rarely necessary for Rooney, a shrewd businessman whose holdings included a successful semi-pro football team. When the NFL sought to expand into America's larger cities, Rooney listened. Although the nation was still in the grip of the Great Depression, the 1932 election of Franklin Roosevelt ushered in social changes that would allow the city of Pittsburgh to join the NFL.
We had the blue laws in Pennsylvania. You weren't allowed to play on Sundays. You weren't allowed to do practically anything on Sundays. And they voted the blue laws out in 1933. And when they voted the blue laws out, I was a friend of Joe Kars, who was the president of the National Football League. And I just took my team, which was the best team, I think, around here. And you could get a lot of arguments about that. And I just took it into the National Football League for $2,500. And I could have got a lot cheaper if I would have argued.
Rooney named his team the Pirates and stocked the roster with homegrown talent such as West Virginia end Wilbur Sortet and Duquesne tackle Armand Nicolai. Another local star in that first season was Ray Kemp, one of only 2 African Americans then playing in the NFL.
We had 22 ball players, and they were the best 22 that we could get. They were a fine bunch of men. We had one thing we did, we had a lot of fun. Much more fun than you have now.
But there were other diversions that also occupied Art Rooney's time.
He didn't pay that much attention to running the football team because his major interest was horse racing. And so he was oftentimes, traveling to one racetrack or another around the country all the time. Horse racing was Art's business because he was the sharpest horse player in the country.
They like to say that he won the team by betting on horses. That is not so. But when he was lucky and did have winning times, that did help keep the team going. I might also say that my father promoted fights, and this, strangely enough, as this would sound now, the fights that were promoted carried the football. Because I will tell you that the Steelers lost money every year. They came in 1933, and they did not make money until 1946.
The Pirates also lost on the field, posting records as ugly as their uniforms. But by 1936, the team's apparel had greatly improved, and so did its record. For the first time, Pittsburgh played winning football, due in large part to the arrival of Joe Bach.
The third coach was Joe Bach, who coached at Duquesne University. I believe that had I continued with Bach, that we would have won championships long before we won them, because he was a thorough football man and a thorough coach.
In 1936, they had really a good team. They had won 5 out of the first 6 games. And the problem that occurred, because of the demands on money that people don't understand, they can't even fathom today, they had to take a trip to the West Coast. You can imagine taking a train trip to the West Coast and playing this schedule, because on the West Coast they had offered them a lot more money to play, and maybe it was a few $1,000s.
We were playing in Los Angeles, an exhibition game. I think it was the Los Angeles Bulldogs, and we traveled by train.
That trip wrecked the Steelers. They won, as I say, the first 5 out of the first 6 games. They lost the last 4 games. The demand of money in the 30s and 40s was so difficult.
The disappointed Bach resigned and returned to college coaching. The Pirates needed a replacement, and Rooney's choice was future Hall of Fame halfback Johnny Blood McNally.
He took a shine to me because I was Irish. Our feeling about the Irish was kind of mutual, is that they're not too strong on intelligence, but they're awfully lucky.
Johnny may have been lucky, but he was also frequently absent, much to Art Rooney's dismay.
He said Blood was the player coach, he said, and we wished he'd do more of each. He said he wouldn't show up half the time.
Blood's the only coach that I ever knew that instead of the coach worrying about the ball players, that the ball players worried about the coach.
Pittsburgh practices were often bloodless affairs, and Johnny's disappearances would occasionally find the Pirates in one city and their coach in another.
I happened to be in Chicago, and there was a game playing, and I get out there. I'm sitting right next to Ernie Nevers. And he wanted to know what I'm doing in Chicago. So I said, I'm here just passing through, scouting. And so no sooner had I said that than it came over the team just like fate. The announcer at the ball game says the score is Philadelphia 15 and Pittsburgh 7.
Even when Johnny did show up, the Pirates usually lost.
Pittsburgh has the ball again. And it's intercepted by Fannie Murray of the Eagles.
Anxious to improve his team's performance, Rooney turned to Pirates college draft experts in hopes of finding more talented athletes.
First head of our draft was an undertaker here in Pittsburgh, and he was good. He was a nut on drafting, that is, on athletes.
Colorado's Byron Whizzer White was college football's marquee player, and the Pirates selected him in the first round of the 1938 draft. But to sign the future Rhodes Scholar, Rooney first had to empty his bank account.
It was a little bit controversial, I might tell you, because George Marshall, who was the president of the Redskins, said, "You're really breaking this thing out of line when you're paying somebody that kind of money." He got $15,800.
Coach Johnny Blood of the Pirates gives his star halfback, Whizzer White, final instructions before the game starts.
In 1938, White became the first rookie ever to win the league rushing title while playing for a last-place team. He helped boost the Pirates' attendance and the credibility of pro football. But after just 1 year, White left the team to continue his studies overseas. He never wore Pittsburgh's colors again, although he later returned to prominence in the black robes of a United States Supreme Court Justice. By 1940, the only Pirates in Pittsburgh were playing baseball. To end confusion and foster its own identity, Art Rooney renamed his club the Steelers. But the name change did little to improve the team's fortunes. The following year, Rooney asked club co-owner and future NFL commissioner Bert Bell to try his hand at coaching. Bell's tenure lasted all of 2 games.
In 1941, Art Rooney and Bert Bell recognized that this coaching arrangement just wasn't working. And Bert decided to step aside as coach, and Art Rooney went out to look for a real coach. And the guy that had always impressed him was a fellow named Buff Donnelly, who was a great player at Duquesne right there in Pittsburgh, and now was the coach at Duquesne and had really built the Dukes into a powerhouse. And Art asked him if he would be willing to coach both Duquesne and the Steelers. Remarkably, he agreed to do both. He practiced the Steelers in the morning, he practiced Duquesne in the afternoon, and this arrangement went on for 5 weeks until the NFL Commissioner Elmer Layden stepped in and said, no, you can't do this anymore. And over that period of time, Duquesne had won all 5 games. The Steelers had lost all 5 games. And Donnelly was then faced with a choice. Which team am I going to continue to coach? Well, that's not really much of a choice. He went back to Duquesne, who finished the season undefeated. The Steelers went on and finished out the year and won only 1 game.
Rooney's on-field problems weren't as worrisome as the acres of empty seats at Steelers home games.
Heck, I remember when Art Rooney, the Steelers had to pay a radio station to carry their games. He paid them.
Mr. Rooney used to keep a little black book, and he'd look at it and tell you how many people were at the ball game. That's where he knew whether they made any money or not. It was 13,000, 14,000. I think he had to have between 13,000 and 14,000 to break even.
Steelers' fortunes vastly improved when Bill Dudley came to Pittsburgh in 1942. The Virginia All-American won Rookie of the Year honors and led the league in rushing. But number 35's talents weren't limited to carrying the ball.
The pass is complete to Bill Dudley, and Dudley is down in scoring territory. It looks like he's got a touchdown there.
Dudley could do lots of things on the football field. He could help you so dang many ways. He wasn't fast, but he was quick, and he had good eyesight. He cut away from people good. You had to respect Dudley. He'd catch the ball, he could play defense, he's a good running back, and he's a tough kind of a football player. He could take a lick and bounce up like a rubber ball, and it didn't bother him a lick.
With Dudley leading the way, the 42 Steelers finished at 7-4. The first winning season in franchise history.
In 1942, the Steelers really had a good team, and had the war not come on, they would have been one of the real top teams. That's when they had drafted Bill Dudley first, and they really had started to accumulate some excellent players. And of course, they all went to the service.
By early 1943, Pittsburgh had lost most of its roster to Uncle Sam. The few remaining players took day jobs to assist in the war effort.
Oh, the Steelers had practically nobody. The only player that was working on the LSTs down in the islands down here, making LSTs for the Navy, he used to work all week and then come and play with the Steelers on Sunday. They lost everybody, including Dudley.
To cope with the shortage, the Eagles and Steelers agreed to consolidate their available athletes into one squad. The intrastate merger produced a new team with a new name.
The Steagles combined the Pittsburgh Steelers and the Philadelphia Eagles. That's where the name Steagles came from. And in my opinion, when you put the two teams together, you had twice as many lousy football players on that Steagles team.
There were also twice as many head coaches, a partnership neither Pittsburgh's Walter Kiesling or Philadelphia's Greasy Neal embraced.
They were like a cat and a dog. They hated each other's guts.
Tony Bova was one of the ends on our team, and Greasy Neal got angry with him, and he said to Bova, "You stand there like a statue of excrement," see? And Bova looks him right in the eye and says, "Yeah, I suppose just like your ends used to do at Yale." And Greasy says, "You're out of here, out of here." He kicked him off the field, and with him went Kiesling, and he took all of his Pittsburgh players.
Despite the feuding, the Steagles still finished with a winning record. The remaining years of wartime football were not nearly as successful. But by 1946, the Steelers welcomed back all their players from the service, as well as a new head coach. Dr. Jock Sutherland, a former dentist who had led the University of Pittsburgh to unparalleled success in the 30s, brought desperately needed leadership to the franchise.
Sutherland taught Art what football was all about, as far as winning and how to win and everything else. And that's the first time Art really got involved in the football team. Steelers never had a sellout until they hired Jock Sutherland as their coach. When they hired Sutherland, they sold out every game that year, and every game for the next 4 years.
Forbes Field fans cheered most often for Bullet Bill Dudley. He earned league MVP honors by leading the NFL in rushing and pass interceptions, a feat that is unlikely to be duplicated. But Dudley's heroics were overshadowed by his contentious relationship with Sutherland. The two rarely agreed on anything, and it finally reached the boiling point at an afternoon practice.
And he said, "Are you coaching this football team?" I said, "No, sir." He said, "Then you'll take your orders the same as anybody else?" I said, "Yes, sir." And he proceeded to say, "Well, some of the ball players resent you," and I knew that was not true. But I could never play for Dr. Sutherland again because he was a great football coach, but we seemed to clash.
He and Dr. Sutherland didn't see eye to eye, and they were both, I think, kind of stubborn, and they didn't get along. And they traded him to Detroit, I guess it was.
Dudley's regrettable departure was eased by the emergence of tailback Johnny Clement. Clement was a natural for Sutherland's single-wing offense, which nearly doubled its scoring output in 1947.
Steelers ball. Operating out of the single wing, Johnny Clement shoots a screen pass out to Tony Campagno, and behind excellent downfield blocking, Campagno scampers 39 yards to pay dirt.
Clement led the team in both passing and rushing, while Charlie Seabright and Chuck Cherundolo anchored a rugged defense that carried Pittsburgh to an 8-4 record. They tied Philadelphia for first place in the division, which meant the Steelers would appear in their first ever postseason game. Playing at home made Pittsburgh the favorite, but it was the Eagles who dominated.
Ferretti has it and goes over with two Steelers on his back, and the Eagles go on to win the Eastern title and the right to meet the Chicago Cardinals for the World's Championship.
Despite the loss, fans were excited about the team's future. But the following spring, tragedy struck.
Jock Sutherland. Every year he used to go on a trip down to the south to visit all his friends in the coaching profession down there. And that's when he ran off the road in Kentucky. They found him wandering in a swamp with a brain tumor. They brought him back to Pittsburgh and he died on the operating table.
Sutherland's death shook the Steelers to their core. They would not appear in another playoff game for 25 years. Pittsburgh's post-war identity remained closely tied to Big Steve, and the city's pro football team sought to reflect the rugged, hard-working, and enterprising image of that industry.
George Buxar attempts a 33-yard field goal. It's blocked by Dale Dodrill. Dodrill races to pounce on the loose ball, and the 210-pound Steeler guard lumbers 50 yards to score for Pittsburgh.
The Steel Town tough image was as real as a punch in the mouth. The Steelers of the late 40s and early 50s had the most ferocious defense in the NFL.
Every time we ever went into Pittsburgh or played a Pittsburgh team, we were more bruised up than we were when we played any other team in the league. We had more injuries, We had more scratches, we had more limpers. It was always a rougher ball game than any other team we ever played.
That's how the Steelers got their real tough reputation. We finally got so we didn't give a damn for anybody, and we didn't have the material, but we knew that somebody was going to pay. Basically, the tradition of the Steelers is hard, rock'em sock'em football, and they're proud of that. I was proud of that when I played for the Steelers.
Stotner, number 70, a future Hall of Famer, was so dominant during his 14 seasons that he is still the only Steeler to have his jersey number retired.
Anybody that played in my era would say that Ernie Stotner was probably the toughest tackle that ever played. And to me, Ernie Stotner was really a symbol of a defensive tackle.
You talk about people like Ernie Stotner. We had a bunch of tough guys on defense. Frank Sinkowitz was a linebacker. And we had a guy by the name of Bill McPeak was really a good, tough football player. Defensively, we had people that really went out and paid the price.
The Browns Air Force swings into action, but Otto Graham finds the ceiling zero as his toss is grabbed off by Jack Butler, who scampers across to score for the Steelers.
We could play with most teams defensively, but offensively, I never felt that we had the same firepower that the other teams had, and we were still playing single wing at that time, too.
The Pittsburgh Steelers, a single wing back attack as taught by Johnny Michelosson.
Jock Sutherland's successor was also a single-wing disciple, even though every other NFL team had abandoned it.
It's that famous Pittsburgh reverse play as Jerry Newsom heads for a score.
Even if we took the ball and marched the length of the field and used up 10 or 12 minutes to score, the other team can come back and score in 2 or 3 minutes.
The Steelers did develop a big play weapon in tight end L.B. Nickel, number 81. But clearly the single wing was an outdated offense. After 4 disappointing seasons, Art Rooney made a coaching change, convincing Joe Buck to return to Pittsburgh. Buck switched to the T formation and made Jim Finks his quarterback. In 1952, the new-look Steelers set a team record for scoring with 300 points.
Pittsburgh parlays their pilfered pass into a 6-pointer as Jim Finks connects with L.B. Nickel in the end zone.
Finks was a very good football player, and he played, I think he started as a tailback because they were running a single wing under John Mike Osen.
Jimmy Finks, a defensive back turned passer, takes charge for the Steelers.
You can't beat a guy like Jimmy Finks, though. He was a good quarterback, and he had a heart bigger than a bucket. He'd do anything in the world for anybody. He's a wonderful guy, and I have the highest respect for that man.
That same season, Finks and the Steelers set a single-game scoring mark. That is still the team record.
I remember one time we played the New York Giants, and they were fighting for the championship. They won the toss, but Steve Owens, who was a great defensive coach, he elected to kick off to us.
Lynn Shadnoy takes the ball on his own 9-yard line and heads straight up the middle. The Steeler linemen pull over the onrushing Giants like 10 pins to clear the way for Shadnoy, who goes 91 yards with no one so much as touching him to give Pittsburgh the lead 7-0.
Then Steve elected to kick again. It was his choice. Kicked off to us, and we went on and scored again and beat them 63-7. Steve said it was a good thing he was a great defensive coach.
Rookie quarterback Gary Krikorian replaces Finks, but you'd never know it, where things look pretty much the same as Krikorian heaves to Jack Butler for a touchdown. The Steelers proved to be real giant killers, closing their season at home with the biggest scoring parade of the year to bump the Giants out of the conference lead with a 63-7 slaughter.
One of Pittsburgh's finest offensive weapons throughout the 50s was free-spirited deep threat Ray Matthews, number 25.
If he were playing in today's game, Ray would have been, I believe, would be an outstanding wide receiver. Was a bit of a character also. Ray was a great lover of horses, and we were training up at St. Bonnie's at the time, up in Olean, New York. And Ray had a couple of horses, and he used to always try to leave Pittsburgh and go to training camp by horseback. He never ever made it. He'd get maybe 15, 20 miles. One time he got as far as Tionesta, which is north of Pittsburgh here. I don't know exactly how far. And the horse come up lame, and he had to call back home and get somebody with a truck to go, come get his horse,
Pittsburgh would be driven by someone else 2 years later when health problems forced Bach's departure. A familiar face returned to Forbes Field in 1954. For the third time, the Steelers would be coached by Walter Kiesling. Kies was going to do things his way, including his use of fullback Fran Rogel, number 33.
Our game always started off with the first couple of plays, every game. Rogel up the middle. And the fans got to holler, hey diddle diddle, Rogel up the middle. And this went on and on and on, game after game. So one day I talked to Kies. I said, Kies, let's fool the fans.
And he said, okay. And he went off grumbling, and he told one of his linemen, he said, listen, we're going to throw on the first down. I want you to go offside, because if this play works, he'll be giving me orders every week. So Finks dropped back. Guy was wide open because the other team was dumbfounded. They'd never done this before. The guy goes all the way, but the lineman's offside. Play's wiped out.
He did it purposely. He told that guy, get offside. Next play, hey diddle diddle, Rogel up the middle.
Kiesling showed more imagination with the rest of his play calling. But in 1955, he badly misjudged the talents of a hometown rookie named John Unitas and cut the future Hall of Fame quarterback in training camp.
It was a year that we had Jim Finks, who was, our starter. We had drafted Teddy Marchibroda the year before, and he was the first pick, so we had him. There was another quarterback by the name of Vic Eaton on the team. You only had 33 players, so you seldom kept 3 quarterbacks. And we kept 3, and, Johnny Unitas was not one of the 3.
Art Rooney's twin sons, who were ball boys with the team, wrote Art and told him, Dad, the best quarterback in camp is this guy Unitas, but they won't let him throw the ball. The only people he's allowed to throw the ball to is us on the sidelines, playing catch.
For as badly as the Steelers mishandled the John Unitas situation, they found themselves a real gem in 1956 in Lowell Perry, who was not only an All-American receiver at the University of Michigan, but a Dean's List student. He was the fastest player the team had ever had to that point, and a deep threat the likes of which Pittsburgh fans had never seen. Everyone agreed that he was on his way to having a brilliant career.
Then Marchibroda calls for a Steeler pass, and it's a beauty. Lowell Perry grabs the ball on the dead run and sprints like a jackrabbit to the promised land.
Unfortunately, 6 games into his rookie year, he suffered an injury that ended his career. But Art Rooney, being the very loyal person that he is, presented Lowell Perry with a rather remarkable opportunity, which was, I'll keep you on as an assistant coach with this team, and I'll continue to pay you the same salary I would have paid you as a player, which allowed Lowell Perry to stay in football and also make enough money that he could ultimately go on to law school. As a result, Lowell Perry became the first African-American assistant coach in the National Football League.
While Rooney was applauded for Perry's hiring, the fans had little to cheer about during games. The Steelers were almost a quarter-century old, but still weren't close to being a contender.
Well, I really never got mad, but of course I was frustrated every game, although people didn't know it. They thought that I was the finest loser of all time, but I wasn't. I felt just as bad about losing as anybody else, but I never said anything.
I remember one time we had a car, and it was a beat-up old car, and I used to drive he and my brothers to the game. We just had gotten beaten very, very bad at Pitt Stadium. So I didn't even hesitate. I'm backing down the street, and he says, "What in the world are you doing?" I said, "This car won't go up this hill in first gear." I said, "I have to put it in reverse. It's the only gear that's powerful enough to get us up." He says, "The team's lousy, the car's lousy," and he just blew up at me, which he would never do publicly. I mean, that's how serious he took these games.
But help would soon be on the way, with the arrival of a championship coach who knew how to win. After winning 2 league titles in Detroit, Buddy Parker came to Pittsburgh in 1957 with one goal: transform the Steelers from pushover to powerhouse.
Buddy Parker, to me, was probably the best coach I ever played for. He really knew what he was doing, and he could make, just great adjustments at game time and during the game.
His game plan was to perfection. And he won some games in Pittsburgh with some people that he wasn't supposed to beat. I mean, some games he wasn't supposed to win. But we always beat the Giants one game when they were at their best. And we certainly didn't have the material in Pittsburgh.
But Parker was also an eccentric who was careful to avoid anything he felt might rile the gods of fortune.
Buddy Parker was a very superstitious man. He believed in luck, and that had a lot to do with things. He wouldn't let you put a hat on his bed. After every loss, he'd cut his shoelaces and his tie off. He wouldn't stay in any room that had number 13 or any numerical equivalent of 13.
Parker certainly felt luckier after trading for his old Detroit quarterback, the colorful and charismatic Bobby Lane. Lane's technique wasn't pretty, but he was a brilliant tactician and a fiery leader. He was also a Texas good old boy who knew every late-night hotspot and swinging jazz club on the NFL circuit.
And what he would end up doing is getting the band to come back to the hotel with him. You know, he'd spread around a few $50 bills, and all of a sudden he would be making music back at the hotel at 2 a.m.
The next day, here's this bitter cold day. The field is a sheet of glass, and Lane passes for 409 yards after leading that band in the wee hours.
My most disappointing part of my career was at Pittsburgh, when we came in second about 4 times out of 5 years. And I dearly wanted to win a championship for Mr. Rooney. We had a good team. We only needed about 3 or 4 extra good players, and we would have won a championship.
One of the good players they did have was Tom the Bomb Tracy, a stocky halfback with an arm like a rocket.
The Steelers have the last word today. They trot out a favorite Buddy Parker play with halfback Tom Tracy firing a pass downfield to Jimmy Orr. Orr romps in to polish off the 51-yard effort, and the Pittsburgh Steelers stay close to the Eastern Conference leaders. Tom Tracy may be shaped like a fire plug, but he runs like a racehorse as he scores the clincher for Pittsburgh's 5th straight victory.
In 1960, Parker traded for future Hall of Fame fullback John Henry Johnson. Although well into his 30s, John Henry was still one of the league's most punishing runners.
Some of the guys on the field try to intimidate you, pile up on you. They step on your hand when they get up, I guess to throw you off the game, if you accept it that way. But I always had a smile on my face because I knew I'm going to get a shot at them. When I hit him, I always smiled. Had a smile on my face, shook my head at him, let him know it was payback time.
Johnson bowled over defenders like 10 pins, rarely finishing a play without leaving a trail of bumps and bruises.
If you were a blitzing linebacker and you were trying to get to Bobby Lane and John Henry stepped up in that hole to meet you, I'll tell you which one's going on the ground. The linebacker, hard. John was going to go through you. His thrill was to look down and see you flatter your back. You hear his teeth over there and an arm over there.
On defense, Parker had another veteran who was equally devastating.
We had one of the best defensive linemen that's ever played in the National Football League, a guy by the name of Eugene Big Daddy Lipscomb. He was 324, 6'9", ran the 40 in 4.5, and as mean as anything you've ever seen. Great football player. He was really the anchor of our defensive team.
Parker's personnel preferences always skewed towards the older and more experienced. But he did make one notable exception, claiming a Giants rookie off the waiver wire, a receiver named Gilbert Leroy Buddy Dial.
Brown behind excellent protection, rifles a touchdown pass to, you guessed it, Buddy Dial.
Deceptive speed, a long striding individual who got on top of a defensive back before he even knew he was coming. I think if the Giants had taken a longer look at his talent, that he would have been a Giant record holder instead of a Steeler record holder.
Dial's records could be found in the team press guide and on Pittsburgh turntables. Buddy's 1962 album of gospel music was nearly #1 with a bullet, exploding on the local country and western charts with a bang. The Steelers' best shot at a title came in 1963. By now, Parker had filled the roster with his kind of players, hard-hitting and hard-living veterans who played and partied with equal enthusiasm.
No, we used to go up to a place called Dante's on Brownsville Road. It was a quiet pub. Dante Sartorio and his brother, Bruno, would never let anybody bother the Steelers when we came in there. I mean, we had the back room to ourselves when we wanted it. And, you know, people come in and aggravate the hell out of you.
To know this team, for example, you got to talk about some of the players. For example, like the offensive line. You got a broad tackle named Dan James. In the off-season, was a collector for a finance company. And one of the front office people used to say the finance company dares you to punch him. At center, you got Buzz Nutter, who was a beer salesman. And the right tackle was Charlie Bradshaw, who was 6'6". And Charlie was a guy, he actually a very bright guy. He took the bar exams to be a lawyer in Texas, and he finished second in the whole state. But we never held that against him.
The crazy quilt line blocked for Ed Brown, a quarterback who tossed down martinis as easily as he threw a football. In Coach Parker, Brown found a kindred spirit.
He says, I don't care what you do, how you do it, what you do off the field. He says, as long as you produce for me in practice and during the game, he said, that's all I want.
Brown took over for the retired Bobby Lane and led the Steelers to 7 wins, 3 losses, and 3 ties. A record that, oddly, would be good enough to win the East, if they could beat New York in the final game of the regular season.
That week, getting ready to play the Giants, we had a chance to do something no Pittsburgh team had done in professional football. We had a chance to win a division championship. What happened, a lot of guys changed their regular routine. Instead of going out and doing what they did naturally or doing what they had done the whole year, you know, go out and have a party, because we had a lot of guys that liked to party on this team. And instead of doing that, a lot of them went into hibernation.
Wednesday night, I'm in Dante's. I'm at the bar, and Dante says to me, we're in trouble. I said, what do you mean we're in trouble? He says, Brownie ain't here. Looks like Brownie's in training, starting Wednesday. He says, that's trouble. And what happened was that guys are roping all day. And Brownie, bam, 20 yards over their heads. Oh, they gone. He started training Wednesday, now he can't complete a pass. And so the Steelers went down to defeat, and there went the Eastern Championship.
It was as bitter a loss as the team had ever suffered. But the Steelers exacted a measure of revenge the next season, when defensive end John Baker unloaded on Giants quarterback Y.A. Tittle.
Tittle going back to throw. He's being rushed. It's being intercepted, and a touchdown. Chuck Hinton grabbed it and galloped in.
This was going to be our Sunday to beat the Giants because they had knocked us out the year before, and that's what we did. Completely attempted to annihilate them. That's what defensive linemen are paid to do. It was a clean hit.
It resulted in both a Steeler touchdown and one of the most famous sports photographs ever taken, this Pulitzer Prize-winning image of the fallen Tittle. Just 2 weeks later, 34-year-old John Henry Johnson made his own headlines against the eventual world champion Browns.
It was a Saturday night game, and I played tight end. Actually, I was supposed to be a split end, but that night John ran the ball 25 or 35 times. It was spectacular for a guy of his age at that time in his career, but he was just possessed. He was going to win that game, and we did.
Controlling the ball all evening, you know, so we kept running, and I had over 200 yards.
John Henry's heroics would be one of the last great moments in the Buddy Parker era. The '64 Steelers stumbled to a losing record, and the following summer at training camp, a bitter and exhausted Parker resigned. The most successful period in team history had come to a sudden and disheartening end. By the mid-'60s, the Steelers still were competitive, but no longer considered a contender. High draft picks had been dealt away, and the players still on the roster were in the twilight of their careers.
I say the average age had to be up over 30 or around 30, you know. And it was an old team. A lot of hard-nosed veterans that were hard on rookies, you know. They were hard drinking, hard living, and partying, and all the things that old teams used to do.
The fun stopped on game day during the 1965 season. Pittsburgh tumbled to its lowest win total in 2 decades. So a new coach was brought in from the world champion Packers to shake things up.
We had a coach named Bill Austin. He was like the Lombardi school, you know, discipline. And, you know, there were certain times you just got fed up with it. I think another thing with Austin was he left so much on the practice field. You couldn't produce the rest of the time because you were already burned out. It was to the point where it was obsessive.
Hey, you right?
The players had to deal with more than just a taskmaster coach. They were also required to wear new uniforms with a shoulder design so radical that fans were confused and opposing teams were convulsed in laughter.
We are known in Pittsburgh as the Golden Triangle, so we tried to put the Golden Triangle on our jerseys. The only thing is, nobody knew what it was, and instead of it looking like a straight triangle, it was sort of bent. And actually, when Tony Parisi had the jerseys washed for the first time, they faded. So rather than it be a golden color, it looked like mustard. Someone said to my father, "What do you think about those new uniforms?" He said, "The uniforms look great, but the players look the same old Steelers."
I'd been on the Steelers when they were a very bad team, when Johnny Carson would tell Steeler jokes on his show, and how we were just the ridicule of the NFL, where we went 2-12, we went 3-11, and we were the laughingstock of the NFL.
Brady Keys once said Brady was a defensive back here at the same time I was, and he said, you know, if you went out to Watts in Los Angeles, there's people on the streets that are better athletes than guys we have here.
The Steelers were by no means a great team in those years, but they did have some outstanding individual players. One of them was Clendon Thomas. When the Steelers had a lot of injuries on offense, they turned to Clendon Thomas and said, "Could you help us out?" He played receiver and played very well. Was a guy who could play anywhere on the field, but the Steelers put him in the defensive secondary, and he was a terrific defensive back. Led the team in interceptions twice, and was one of the first real great blitzers from the deep safety position. Dick Hoke is one of those players that coaches love. And the Steelers were really lucky to get him. They got him as a 7th-round draft pick, almost an afterthought. And he played for 10 years and was tremendously valuable to a team that didn't have much in the way of weapons. Dick Hoke could do an awful lot of things. Tough runner, excellent receiver, and he also was one of the best guys in the league at throwing the halfback option pass. And probably the best target that Hoke had on his option passes was Roy Jefferson, who was a really unique blend of size and strength and speed. A big man who could really run. And he became the first receiver in Steeler history to have back-to-back 1,000-yard seasons. He was also an excellent return man. And in 1968 against the Cardinals, he broke off probably the greatest punt return in franchise history.
Jefferson and Hoke did their best to produce points, but top to bottom, the Steelers did not have the talent to compete with the rest of the NFL.
Everything went downhill. We started trading draft choices away for people that were finished in the NFL. We were playing with a bunch of older players, and really this was the last stop for them. And it got frustrating, you know, losing every week. Every year it was, well, we're rebuilding. You know, we never stopped rebuilding.
Yeah, but what was it? It was too deep to start with. God almighty.
You would get so depressed back in those days. I mean, you would just play your heart out and then lose the game in the fourth quarter. It was a scenario. It was time after time after time, and you figured, let's enjoy ourselves. You know, if we're going to lose, let's have fun doing it.
Get what you want. Let's go. Big down, gang. Let's go. Stick 'em. Don't get caught. That 24 is a little. Let's wrap him.
the Steelers' defense built a reputation that put fear in their rivals. They understood that Sundays with Pittsburgh would be no picnic.
You asked any opposing players back then, especially offensive players, you asked them what they thought about playing the Steelers, their reaction would be, we know we're going to win, but we know we're going to get the kicked out of us.
The Steelers of the 60s seldom tasted victory, but their rugged brand of football left its mark and set the tone for the great Pittsburgh defenses that were soon to follow. After 5 straight losing seasons, the Steelers hired former Chargers and Colts assistant Chuck Noll as their new head coach. It didn't take long for players and fans to see the Pittsburgh franchise was about to get a serious makeover.
The first meeting with Chuck Noll, we had a lot of cynical old veteran players who'd seen a lot of coaches come and go, and there was sort of this attitude, well, show me your stuff, coach. And he gave a speech which he essentially was saying to us, look, the reason you've been losing has nothing to do with your attitude. The reason you've been losing is you're not good enough. You can't run fast enough, you can't jump high enough, you're not quick enough, you're not skilled enough. And it was like, wow, this guy. And then he said, and I'll tell you what I'm going to do. I'm going to get rid of most of you. And I'm going to bring in the guys who can play these defenses and play these. They're going to be harder. I'm going to make you do the hard stuff.
Everybody wanted to give us all these guys, and I got this kind of early. People wanted to give you their problems, and come in and get good players. So, it kind of dawned on me that's not what we want to do. We want to be able to bring people in, get them in our system, and not get somebody else's problems.
Noll's NFL debut was a happy one when the Steelers opened the '69 season by defeating the Lions.
We won our first game, and the first thing we was talking about, all the players and everybody was talking about, said, we're going to the Super Bowl this year. And everybody was real happy that week, and we played 13 more games. We just dropped every game, 13 in a row, and everybody stopped saying anything about the Super Bowl at that time.
Noll's first season record of 1-13 was the worst in franchise history. But improving the quality of play was just one of his immediate concerns.
We worked out at South Park. The dressing room was in the basement of this 100-year-old house, which was not very good. The practice field, water drained into it, so if there was any kind of rain, it was a pigsty. We would take them to a better place that was into the where they would exercise horses in this horse barn, and there's manure on the ground.
And I think the field that we practiced on had a nice little slope to it, It went with being 1-13.
Art Rooney had problems of his own. The NFL was negotiating a merger with the American Football League that would require some NFL franchises moving to the newly formed AFC. One of the teams asked to switch was the Steelers.
We were in a car, Tex Ram, Pete Rozelle, and myself. He said, I'm going to move the Browns into the American Football Conference, providing that the Steelers came along, because we were Art Rooney's meal ticket every year. We kept the Steelers alive in the 60s.
I was totally against it. I thought this is a terrible thing. I had been really part of the wars where, we were trying to keep our players, trying to get players out of college and things like that. It was a real battle.
Art Rooney and Dan Rooney came up to visit me, and I turned to Art Rooney and I said, Art, will you go with me? And Dan Rooney interrupted. He says, we're not going to any American Football League, not the Steelers. You better get somebody else. And the old man chomped on a cigar. I'll never forget it. He says, all right, Dan, you can stay. I'm going with Art Modell. That's how he broke the logjam.
In 1970, the Steelers would be playing in a new conference and a new home. Glittering Three Rivers Stadium was an immediate hit with both fans and players.
When Three Rivers was done, we walked into this sumptuous locker room. Really was carpeting on the floor, all this stuff. These guys are just sitting there glowing, It was, there was no question. They thought this was something special, and they were something special.
Special is the only way to describe John Frenchy Fuqua and his astonishing afternoon on the final day of the 1970 season. The best single-game performance ever by a Steelers running back.
To this day, I still think I'm the fastest man on the team from the 70s. Like, they may say Fawon, Shanklin, Frank Lewis, all these 9-3 guys. I have a 72-yarder and an 85-yarder, and most yards gained in one game in the history of the Steelers. And one other thing I must say, I've never been caught from behind.
Chasing down ball carriers was just one of many skills possessed by defensive tackle Joe Green, the first superstar of the Chuck Noll era.
I think you've got to look back on the history of the Steelers draft up to 1969, which was the failure of that person, and no one ever made it.
Steelers' first-round selection, Joe Green.
So when they drafted Joe Green out of North Texas State, you know, I'd never heard of Joe Green, nor had I heard too much about North Texas State.
Joe changed all that, immediately establishing himself as one of the premier defensive players in football.
Joe just sort of caved in the offensive line. Joe in his time was so good that if you didn't block 2 guys on, you blocked 3 guys on. I never saw a guy take Joe Green one-on-one.
I was a bigger guy than most, but I wasn't the strongest nor the fastest. But I put my desire to win against anybody. It wasn't about doing well. It was about winning.
In 1970, Mean Joe and his nasty attitude was complemented by the arrival of the league's #1 draft pick, a homespun quarterback named Terry Bradshaw.
He came up from Shreveport, Louisiana, you know, and yeah, a little unsophisticated.
How about that, huh? Woo!
Hey, get your hair cut?
Bradshaw displayed tantalizing flashes of brilliance during his rookie season, and even more self-confidence.
And as the games come along, as the year progresses, I hope to continually get better, and in the future I hope to be the greatest quarterback that's ever stepped foot on this stadium or any other stadium.
But Bradshaw was far from being that quarterback in the early 70s. As his mistakes multiplied, so did the number of Bradshaw's critics.
No, he had a lot of pressure from old veterans like myself who were saying, you know, you're our #1 draft choice, turn us around instantly kind of thing. I think that was unfair of us.
I don't think there's any question that the biggest misconception of me was the fact that I was dumb. Ozark Ike or the Little Abner or the dumb image is the one that stuck. Finally it just came out, hey, this guy's not too sharp.
Just before Bradshaw hit rock bottom, Mean Joe came to his rescue.
It's probably an overstatement to say that Joe Green saved Terry Bradshaw's career, but I think that there's a certain element of truth to that. Bradshaw was struggling. The players were on the verge of splitting in two. Some of them wanted Terry Hanratty to become the regular quarterback. Everybody was down on Bradshaw, the coaches, the media, the fans. And Joe, one day after practice, ripped into everybody for not supporting Bradshaw, said Brad's our quarterback and we're going to live and die with him.
Joe says, I don't like something, then we all don't like something. Joe says this is how it should be, in whatever manner he may present it. That's how it's going to be.
Green, Bradshaw, and Noll became the backbone of the team. And in 1971, the Steelers finished with a record of 6-8. It would be their last losing season for the next 13 years. There was a welcome glow of optimism in Pittsburgh as the Steelers began the 1972 season.
Well, you see, 40 years. You have to understand, 40 years that the Steeler organization never won anything. From 1933, when Mr. Rooney bought the team. To 1972, it was always like the same old Steelers. Wait the next year.
There was a saying that I heard once that if there's a way for the Steelers to lose a game, same old Steelers, they'll lose the game. I think that we took issue with that. Each player, you're not speaking about us. You must be talking about those guys the previous 40 years because we're very different. We're going to win.
The Steelers had assembled a nucleus of hungry and talented young players. And in Chuck Noll, they had a coach who knew how to cultivate a winning atmosphere.
The most unique thing about that team was the chemistry. Pulling for each other, the defense pulling for the offense, and the offense pulling for the defense. I think it was extraordinary. I think Chuck Noll, that's his greatest legacy. He created an environment that was an outstanding work environment. Players pulled together, worked together, respected each other.
We all were just young guys. A lot of us were from small black colleges, and we learned a lot from management. We learned a lot from Mr. Rooney. We learned a lot from Chuck Noll. And at the same time, we all learned a lot from each other.
The big addition that season was rookie running back Franco Harris.
Here's the one thing that was missing. We had some good backs. We had Frenchie Fuqua, we had Preston Pearson, but we didn't have the big power back. And Franco gave us that type of player. It's funny, Franco looked bad in practice at times. So we weren't sure what we had until we put him in the first preseason game in Atlanta. And about the third time he touched the ball, he started around left end and there was no hole and he reverses his field and he goes 75 yards for a touchdown. We knew we had something special right there.
A lot of things that I did was change directions, stop and go, and it made things happen. And like to me, that was always the art of running, and maybe that's why I've always been such a great Barry Sanders fan, because the art of running is being able to change and do things because of what's supposed to be there is not there. And so it basically has to be an instinct.
The first-round draft pick from Penn State became the first Steeler since John Henry Johnson to rush for more than 1,000 yards in a season. And his 5.6-yard average and 10 rushing touchdowns were franchise records. Franco stood out in accomplishment and appearance.
Franco was a beautiful man, for one thing. He was just really mysterious looking. I mean, he looked like he ought to be presiding over some sort of the Venetian Senate or something, and he ought to be Othello or somebody. I don't know. He had this striking mixture of Italian and African American blood. And he had this one amazing sort of distance in his face, and he was very soft-spoken and didn't say much. He had a mystique about him, which was probably heightened by the fact that he didn't talk a lot.
As Rookie of the Year, Harris led the Steelers to 11 wins and their first ever division title. Hosting their first playoff game in 25 years, the Steelers faced Oakland in a tense defensive struggle. A late touchdown gave the Raiders a 7-6 lead, and it appeared the Steelers' storybook season was over.
And I was standing next to Rouser and at this fourth down, and I said, John, it ain't going to end this way. I mean, this is just too good of a season. It's just we've overcome too much. It's not going to end this way. How did I know?
It's down to one big play. 4th down and 10 yards to go. Hang on to your hats. Here come the Steelers out of the huddle. 22 seconds remaining. And Bradshaw back and looking again. Bradshaw running out of the pocket, looking for somebody to throw to. Fires it downfield. And there's a collision. It's caught out of the air. The ball is pulled in by Franco Harris. Harris is going for a touchdown for Pittsburgh. Harris is going. Franco Harris pulled the football. I don't even know where it came from.
Franco was very special from the standpoint that he never took a play off. I mean, he finished the play. His assignment on that particular play was to block the outside linebacker. So he goes over to block the outside linebacker. He's not coming. So he sees the scramble, so he starts out to try to become a receiver. So he's in the area there where the ball comes. And, all of this comes from doing more than you're expected to do.
I didn't see it. I just heard the crowd noise.
And while I was laying on the ground, all I could think about is, God, I must have done something great. I must have really put it in there in the way, That's what I'm thinking, man. I have no idea. I got this horrible pass. I was throwing it, and it's bouncing around.
From out of nowhere came Franco Harris. And I believe he was riding a white stallion.
The only Pittsburgher not celebrating was Art Rooney. The Steelers president had started down to the locker room prior to the last play, so he had no idea the Steelers had won.
He was quite surprised by all the hysteria when he came to the locker room, and to see the change in his face and from going from one of sadness to joy. And he didn't say it in words, it's just the look on his face.
Absolutely unbelievable.
In 1974, the Steelers went from contenders to champions, and they took the first step that spring at the NFL Draft.
Pittsburgh on the first round selects Lynn Swann, wide receiver, Southern California.
Well, we felt that we had to have some weapons, and we searched and came up with, I think, were two real prizes.
Swann, number 88, and John Stallworth, number 82, were big play receivers. Fifth-round pick Mike Webster became a Hall of Fame center. The second-round choice was a skinny linebacker named Jack Lambert.
I was about 6'4". I think I weighed into training camp at about 203 pounds. They had two guys named Andy Russell and Jack Ham on the outside, who I thought were probably going to play for the next 30 years, and I wouldn't get much of a chance to play. So my goal was to play well on the special teams, try and make the team that way, and hopefully someday get a chance to play.
The Steelers' coaches moved Lambert to middle linebacker, where he found a home for 11 seasons. What he lacked in muscle, he made up in ferocity and intelligence. Lambert was always around the football, and he made his presence felt. The Steelers were best known for their defensive line, the steel curtain. Gold shoes were the trademark of L.C. Greenwood. Ernie Holmes had his arrowhead hairstyle. Dwight Mad Dog White was known for his gap-toothed smile. And then there was Joe Green, who attracted attention the old-fashioned way by simply playing his position better than anyone else. Green was named NFL Defensive Player of the Year for a second time in 1974 and led the charge that produced a league-high 52 sacks and 47 takeaways. The Steelers finished the 1974 regular season with the best record in the AFC Central Division. But the two-time defending Super Bowl champion, Miami Dolphins, were the favorites to repeat when the playoffs began. However, in the first round, Oakland ended the Dolphins' reign in dramatic fashion. And when some people conceded the championship to the Raiders, Chuck Noll took offense.
John Madden, at the time was the coach, said that the best two teams in the National Football League had played today, and this was the Super Bowl. Tuesday when we met, Chuck said that in our meeting, general meeting, that it was said that the Super Bowl was played this past Sunday, and the best two teams played in that game. He said, well, fellas, I want to tell you that the best team in the National Football League is in this room.
That statement that he made excited everybody in that locker room. I mean, the adrenaline started to flow and hair started to stand up on the back of folks' neck, and yeah, we can do this. We can do this. We can win this game.
The AFC Championship was played in Oakland, where the Steelers had lost in the playoffs the previous year. This time, it was different.
They didn't have a chance that day. Bottom line, they didn't have a chance. The state of mind that our football team was in that day, we could have beaten them at 12 o'clock, 4 o'clock, and at 9 o'clock.
The game against the Oakland Raiders was the best game the Pittsburgh Steelers ever played. And it was the most important.
The dynasty of Super Bowls was born that day when we beat Oakland in Oakland, We felt that now we're not a good team, now we're a great team.
They felt at that time that they were a team of destiny.
On a cold, blustery day in New Orleans, the Steelers played their first Super Bowl against the older, more experienced Minnesota Vikings.
The Vikings had that old school mentality, run at the strength of the opponent, attack the strength. Big mistake. I mean, they ran at Joe Green all day. They got nowhere. He just was all over that field and just blew them away.
The Vikings gained only 17 yards on 21 rushing attempts. And when Fran Tarkenton went to the air, Joe Green was there to intercept. No touchdowns were scored until the third quarter, when Franco Harris followed a Jerry Mullins block into the end zone. Harris rushed for a Super Bowl record 158 yards and was named the game's most valuable player. In the fourth quarter, Bradshaw sealed the victory.
Here is Bradshaw rolling right. Bradshaw gets a big block and fires into the end zone, complete for the touchdown. Hitting Larry Brown in the end zone.
At long last, the Steelers were world champions.
The little thing that you need to put you over the top to give you the edge, I thought it was Mr. Rooney winning the game for the Chiefs. For me, it was real. And I think, reading the pulse of the team, I think that we all felt that way. Winning one for the Chiefs was real.
One of the great opportunities I had was to give a game ball away after the Super Bowl, the first Super Bowl. And we had decided to give it to Joe Green, and I got up on this stage, and I saw the Chief. And I realized that I had to give the ball to the Chief.
And that's what ultimately that whole team and that whole period was about. We played for something other than money. Okay, we didn't make a lot of money, but we wanted to be winners, and it couldn't have happened for a better guy than Art Rooney Sr.
I was so happy that we won because we had never won. And winning the Super Bowl for the first time that we were in it was a big relief to me that I could say, well, at least now we're the champions.
The line of march through the downtown area is just packed with people right now. What a big party shaping up down there. You should see Gateway Center with the yellow balloons and the signs, "Go Terry, go! Defense, defense! We're number one!" A lot of excitement. You can see it on the face of the city.
There was a spirit in Pittsburgh during those years that was even bigger than the Pittsburgh Steelers. It was a time in Pittsburgh where that city needed something to cling to.
That was the time that the steel industry was going down, and with this difficult era that there was going on with the steel industry and people, really losing their jobs, the Steelers just lifted the community and gave the city a sense of pride.
No city, not New York or LA or Boston or Chicago, ever had a run of 10 years the way Pittsburgh did in the 70s. The Steelers won 4 Super Bowls, the Pirates won 2 World Series. We had a National Collegiate Football Champion and a Heisman Trophy in the decade of the 70s. And the city came to identify with that stretch.
I think every Pittsburgher or people in the region that were around here during the 70s felt that they had a piece. They actually owned a piece of that pride and that success that we all experienced as players on the field.
Get for the Steelers! Big year for Franco! Mean Joe Green!
Oh, it's the greatest thing ever. It's done so much for Pittsburgh, for the sports fans, nationwide notoriety. Great. See, we're greater than just mill workers. There's more than that to Pittsburgh, right?
Yeah, right. They loved us and adored us because we brought pride to the city for being a champion.
The relationship between the Steelers and their followers was unique. It seemed like there were as many fan clubs as there were players on the roster. The Steelers had the NFL's greatest home field advantage in the 70s, winning 84% of their regular season games at Three River Stadium. The Steelers also won 8 of their 9 postseason home games.
Being in Pittsburgh in the fall on a Sunday afternoon when we became a competitive football team was the place to be. You had to be at the stadium. I mean, that was That wasn't happening.
Pittsburgh's going to the Super Bowl.
The fans were not passive. I mean, they were in it. They were a part of it.
We got a feeling Pittsburgh's going to the Super Bowl.
We didn't play fancy dancy football. We were right in the face.
Jack Ham, number 59, won a starting job as a rookie and quickly became one of the best linebackers in football. In 1975, the Football News named him NFL Defensive Player of the Year. Mel Blount was a 6'3", 205-pound cornerback who used his size and strength to punish enemy receivers. He also was a slick ball hawk, and in 1975 became the first Steeler to lead the league in interceptions since Bullet Bill Dudley in 1946. The Steelers set a club record with 12 regular season wins in 1975, and in the postseason, they would once again meet their bitter rivals, the Oakland Raiders.
The rivalry between the Oakland Raiders and the Pittsburgh Steelers was a blood feud. We disliked the Raiders. We had no respect for them.
The Raiders were the bullies. You know, we would call them the bullies. They were the bully guys of the NFL. If they got you down, they'd kill you. Simple as that. They had the no holds barred, take no prisoners style.
One incident when the play went the other side of the field and Atkinson just cold-cocked Swann. It was probably one of the more brutal things I've seen happen in professional football, but that was the way they played. I think their hope was to intimidate the guy that they hit, but also to have some effect on the people that saw that. For me and a lot of the players on our offense, it had the reverse effect. You know, it was not going to intimidate us. We felt that we were as physical a football team as they were.
The icy conditions in Pittsburgh hampered both offenses until the Steelers finally broke through in the fourth quarter.
At the 25, with the snowflakes falling again, Bradshaw to Harris, can't find the hole inside, goes outside to the left, breaks a tackle, he's to the 20 down the sideline, he's going to go for a Pittsburgh touchdown.
Then Bradshaw and Stallworth put the game away.
Bradshaw is back to pass, they're coming after him, gets away, and now he throws to the end zone, look out, it is caught, the catch by Johnny Stallworth. The defensive back covering on the play, slipped and fell.
For the Steelers, winning back-to-back conference championships meant going from frigid Pittsburgh to balmy Miami for Super Bowl X. Here, the opponent would not be the villainous Raiders, but pro football's glamour team, the Dallas Cowboys.
It made it very sweet that the opponent was Dallas, because they were the America's team, and we were just a blue-collar team, Western Pennsylvania. I guess we wanted some of what they had.
And I think a lot of us, in fact, I know I did, and I feel that most of the Steelers did, took it personally that, who granted them to be America's team.
My Cowboys. I mean, that kind of crap that you heard all the time. The fans and the media hype and the creation of that America's team, I think, is what we resented.
The Steelers trailed 10-7 in the third quarter. But when Roy Gerela missed a field goal and the Cowboys' Cliff Harris taunted him, Jack Lambert took matters into his own hands.
It was just a spur-of-the-moment thing. I turned around and I saw Harris smacking him alongside the helmet. And I couldn't believe it, So I went back, I grabbed him by the shoulder pads, and I threw him down. And the referee, or the umpire, or someone said to me, "You're out. You're out of here, Lambert." And I said, "Wait a minute." I said, "This is a Super Bowl. You can't throw me out of this game." He said, "Well, then you get back in the huddle and you shut up." And I said, "Yes, sir."
Lambert shut up, but his play spoke volumes. His emotional spark was just what the Steelers needed to seize the momentum. It started with Lambert on defense, then spread to the offense, where Bradshaw looked to his big play receiver, Lynn Swann.
Everybody remembers the one where Swann is falling and he's catching the ball, the tips of his fingers, and he makes it. That's the famous one that's always repeated. He made a better one on the sideline right in front of our bench just for a first down, right in front of our team, and it was the most extraordinary thing I've ever seen. Lynn went up and did this acrobatic thing where he twisted his body, he was like 8 feet in the air, and it was an impossible catch. What was doubly impossible was to catch it and then keep your feet in bounds, which he did. And we all just kind of, did you see that? You know, it was unbelievable.
With 3 minutes to go, Bradshaw hit Swann with a pass that iced the game and made Swann the MVP.
I only caught 4 passes in that game, and 1 for a touchdown. But they were the biggest 4 because of the site, because of the Super Bowl, of any 4 passes in any one game I've ever played. The media, everybody that put you on top as the key player, the key performance in the biggest game of that season. And it's yours. It's in your pocket, and you stick it in your coffin when it's all over.
The Pittsburgh Steelers' goal in 1976 was to win a 3rd consecutive Super Bowl. It had never been done before, but the Steelers were confident they had the team to do it.
I know that I speak for Mr. Rooney, Art Rooney himself, because I know he felt this way, that the 1976 team was the best team that we ever had.
But a series of injuries, including one to Terry Bradshaw, led to 4 Steeler losses in their first 5 games.
Everybody counted us out. So now you guys are fatheads now. You don't have the drive, the enthusiasm anymore.
We didn't like that 4-game losing streak at all. It was, we couldn't figure out what the hell happened.
And we had to sit down and say, you know, who are we? And what kind of football team are we? You know, our back's up against the wall. We can't afford to lose another ball game. We can get to a Super Bowl with 4 losses. We can't get there with 5.
Rookie Mike Kruzek took over at quarterback, and the Steelers went back to basics.
Rocky Bleier going off the right side gave it a great second and 3rd effort.
Rocky Bleier and Franco Harris became only the 2nd pair of teammates to rush for 1,000 yards in the same season.
Each game was a playoff game. We just could not afford to lose a game. It was incredible football. To me, it was Steeler football like I've never seen it before.
When we got it together, look at us now. These are the real Pittsburgh Steelers. And I think, yeah, it was a bit of retaliation. You know, you thought we were out, but no way.
The Steel Curtain defense played its best football, posting 3 consecutive shutouts and 5 shutouts total, as Pittsburgh put together a 9-game winning streak.
We were a dominating, intimidating defense at that point. We just felt that nobody could move the football against us, and we had that kind of attitude.
The Steeler defense was, I think, by far the greatest defense ever to play in the National Football League. The 85 Bears have their supporters, but I don't think any defense was ever as good. And I think statistics bear that out.
Pittsburgh still needed a win in the final week of the regular season to make the playoffs.
When the Steelers had played 5 games this year, they had a record of 1 win and 4 losses. Many of their followers around the country and many of them at home figured they had no chance to get into the playoffs and take a shot at a possible 3rd consecutive Super Bowl championship. But they have done a most amazing turnaround.
The Steelers were on a roll, and with Bradshaw back in the lineup, they put a cap on the Oilers.
To take the football for a Steeler touchdown.
And what a sensational play it was.
And there's nothing but happiness down in that Steeler bench area. Just a great victory, a vital one, and I think a tribute to the Steeler organization.
During their 9-game winning streak, the Steelers had allowed a total of just 28 points. 1 week later, the Steelers and their fans were in Baltimore for a playoff game with the Colts.
And they had a good team that year. And there were some people actually thinking they were going to take it all. And we went up there and just beat them to death. I mean, just annihilated them.
On the game's first series, Bradshaw hit Frank Lewis with a 76-yard touchdown pass. That was just the beginning, as the Steelers rolled up a divisional playoff record 526 total yards.
I mean, we just massacred Baltimore. I mean, we had a great game, but unfortunately, in that game, I guess you could say that this wasn't meant to be. Fate intervened, and we had some injuries. We lost myself, we lost Rocky Bleier, and we lost Frenchy Fuqua.
The Steelers were a crippled team when they went to Oakland for the AFC Championship game. Franco Harris dressed but could not play. And while the defense fought valiantly, it finally cracked under the relentless Raiders' attack. But the Steelers did not give up their championship crown without a fight.
The biggest heartbreak that I ever had on a football field, I remember making the comment after the game was over. I said, just give me a six-pack and about a half an hour rest. Let's go out and play them again, because I think we can beat them. It really hurt. That one really hurt. It really did.
The Steel Curtain defense was so successful that other teams began copying its methods. As a result, scoring around the league went down, and the NFL Competition Committee felt it had to do something to get offenses back into the game.
Basically, the league decided to change the rules. You're no longer allowed to jam the receivers the way we were jamming them. You're no longer allowed to do a lot of the things, a lot of the tactics that we were using were essentially governed out of the game.
It made into what I term fast break football. And the defense was still great, but we couldn't hold teams to 10 points.
But in Lynn Swann and John Stallworth, the Steelers had two game breakers who could take advantage of the new rules. Swann had a career-high 61 receptions in 1978, and Stallworth averaged nearly 20 yards per catch.
That year was a shift. We won the first two Super Bowls with a very dominant defense. We were starting to become of age as an offense. Bradshaw's maturity in throwing the football. You know, Swannies continued to perform well, and it was different in that regard because it was a return. It was a different win. It was more predicated on how well we played as an offense, as opposed to, you know, having Green and the guys just totally dominate another team's offense.
And I think that, to me, showed a lot of our greatness, that we just didn't win during one era when it was the running and, you know, defensive line era. Now they made some rule changes and the game opened up more, and the passing game was a bigger part of football, and we took advantage of that.
Bradshaw looking quickly to throw out to the right. Swann takes it at the 12, breaks the tackle and goes in.
Swann was the flashier and more celebrated receiver. But Stallworth, who came to Pittsburgh as a fourth-round draft pick from Alabama A&M, proved that he too had star quality. Number 82 went on to play 14 seasons and become Pittsburgh's all-time leading receiver.
Really, one of the things that really motivated John was to prove to the football world that he was on that same level. He would be a great representative of what the Steelers are about. John is tough, he's honest, he works hard, he has character, and he's willing to compete. And I think that, in a nutshell, is what the Steelers were all about.
We got the best offense, the best defense, the best QB, the best running back, the best everything, best coaching staff, best front office, and we got the terrible time.
Terrible time. What more do we need?
It's always been the case in most situations. You have a go-to guy. But I believe you can have more than one go-to guy on the football team. We did for the Pittsburgh Steelers. And they could go to me, and I would be open. They could go to John, and John would be open. Heck, we didn't even have to be open. Just come to us. We'll make the catch.
Swan and Stallworth combined for 20 touchdowns. And when you add the running threat of Franco Harris, the Steelers' offense was almost unstoppable.
I'll tell you what you get from it, confidence. You get a great amount of confidence when you walk up in a big game knowing that these guys are going to be there for you. You can depend on them. You can trust them. You know they're smart. They're intelligent. They'll make the audibles if necessary. It's a powerful feeling to step on. You ever sit on top of a great horse? You sit on him and you feel that power. That's about what it's like.
The Steelers rode that thoroughbred offense back to the Super Bowl, where once again they turned it loose on the Dallas Cowboys.
Bradshaw hesitates and then throws deep for Stallworth in the end zone. Touchdown, Pittsburgh! Johnny Stallworth caught it between two Dallas Cowboys.
To me, there was so much energy in that game. People probably were going in thinking this is going to be a defensive struggle, and it got to be an offensive battle in a way. When I look back at that game and say, wow, it was great to be a part of that game, and because it was one of the greatest games of all times.
Players on both sides elevated their game.
Bradshaw rolling right, under pressure, threw it to Blyer, and the rock went up and snagged it.
It was a hard-fought game. But in the end, the Steelers made history as the first team to win 3 Super Bowls.
Terry Bradshaw giving the ball to Franco through the middle, then over to 15 to 10 to 5. Touchdown Pittsburgh. They opened it up down the middle, and the big guy went straight ahead through the hole.
I think Super Bowl 13 is significant because it set the Steelers apart. We won 2 Super Bowls back-to-back, 9 and 10. And we established history for the Pittsburgh Steelers. But winning Super Bowl 13, the Pittsburgh Steelers established themselves as a dynasty, as a team that could put it together year in and year out, who could fall off that Super Bowl platform and regain it. And we established for this franchise, for the ownership, for management, for the players in the city of Pittsburgh, that this is a place we could be consistently by getting back there in Super Bowl 13. And so I think that gave the city of Pittsburgh and this organization, that thread of strength and consistency they had been looking for so many years.
In 1979, the Steelers' goal was to win back-to-back Super Bowls for the second time. Along the way, they scored 51 points to rout the Browns in Cleveland and won the AFC Central for the 6th consecutive year. With Jack Lambert earning Defensive Player of the Year honors, the Steelers were once again the favorites as they entered the postseason for the 8th year in a row.
Offense, offense, take that football all the way up the field.
Here go the Pittsburgh Steelers into the National Football League playoffs, going up against the Miami Dolphins. The Steelers out to win their 4th Super Bowl victory. The Steelers coming into the NFL playoffs looking for big number 4.
The Steelers are so great, and they play the best of all to take our Pittsburgh to the Super Bowl.
Against Miami, the Steelers scored 20 first-quarter points en route to an easy win. The next week against Houston, the Steelers' defense limited the Oilers and Earl Campbell to just 24 yards rushing. For the Steelers, It was their 7th consecutive postseason win at Three Rivers Stadium. They were headed back to the Super Bowl for the 4th time in 6 years.
Super Bowl programs, Super Bowl souvenirs, Super Bowl pennants, Super Bowl programs.
At Super Bowl 14, the Steelers faced a lightly regarded Los Angeles Rams team that had lost 7 games during the regular season.
I didn't think they were that good. I didn't think they had that much talent. They were the perfect setup for us because their weakness was our strength, and that was going deep.
Bradshaw went deep, and Lynn Swann was there.
Bradshaw is back, and he's going to Swann, and Swann makes a circus catch in the end zone. Unbelievable catch for the touchdown. Swann beat 2 men.
The Rams were 12-point underdogs, and perhaps the fact that no one gave them a chance was what made them so dangerous. They had nothing to lose, and their offense threw everything it had at the vaunted steel curtain.
And they're getting after us pretty good in this game. And Wendell Tyler was running up the middle, and Jackie Slater was running up the field blocking. He was saying, "Thank you, Jesus, thank you, Jesus." And I said, "Gee, well, we're in trouble." And I told Dwight, and Dwight said, "Hey, Jesus ain't got nothing to do with this thing we're getting ready to do with these people."
The defending champions were stunned to find themselves trailing the Rams 13-10 at halftime.
But that game should have been long gone out of hand. We should have gotten on top of them quick and really taken the game away from them. By God, they wouldn't let us.
In the second half, Bradshaw rallied the Pittsburgh offense and, in the process, won his 2nd Super Bowl MVP award.
Now Bradshaw pumping, firing downfield. There goes Stallworth. He pulls it in at the 30, the 20, the 10, the 5, and it's a touchdown for Pittsburgh on the ball to Stallworth. And Stallworth beat Ron Terry. Oh, did he beat him?
The Rams still were within 5 points late in the game, but Jack Lambert's interception ended the threat and set up a clinching touchdown by Franco Harris. The Steelers had been pushed to the limit by the Rams, but they responded like true champions.
We played football for those reasons. We played football to be challenged. That was my attitude, and I think that's the attitude of all my teammates that played on those championship teams. There was no fear. There was no like, well, what if you didn't think about losing. And we never thought about losing any of the Super Bowls. Ever. No one ever talked about it, never thought about it, and it didn't happen.
The Steelers were not merely the team of the decade, they were a team for all time.
And winning championships is the measure of every player in any sport. And we did that, and we did it together. To me, that's what I treasure. That's my memory. That's what I take to my grave.
Who could ask for 4 Super Bowls? I mean, you say, give me a Super Bowl. We got 4.
Nothing can be greater than being the best. And I think that that's something that I'll always carry in my heart and impart to my children and to my friends about grabbing that brass ring, walking off that field and saying, hey, I'm the best in the world. I'm the best in the world, and I was glad to be a part of it.
Each season brings new challenges, even to a team that had won 4 Super Bowls in 6 years. But Chuck Noll approached this camp with the same rational philosophy he had 12 summers before.
Training camp, we start from scratch again, and everybody has to come in with the idea that it is a new season, that what you've done in the past really doesn't count any longer. And we have to judge the people to see if they come in with the same enthusiasm that they came in when they were rookies, or if they're satisfied with what they have accomplished. These are all things that you want to find out about veterans.
There was no drop-off from veteran All-Pros Jack Lambert, L.C. Greenwood, Jack Ham, and Donnie Shell. But ultimately, their contributions couldn't prevent the Steelers from finishing out of the playoffs for the first time in 8 years.
What the Steelers faced in the early 80s was what all great teams face at the end of their run, which is things begin to catch up with you. Your great players get older, injuries become a factor, all the years of drafting at the bottom of the round ultimately has an attrition effect on teams. And there are a lot of great teams that fall off the edge of the earth at times like that. But really good teams with a really good organization, a really good coaching staff, can continue to win. And that's what the Steelers did. And I think in those years, in those early 80 years, was when people really began to appreciate what a terrific coach Chuck Noll was. Because even though the great players of the 70s moved on, the team remained very competitive and a playoff challenger, largely because the coaching staff knew how to keep those elements together.
In 1982, Pittsburgh and the Steelers joined together to celebrate the team's 50th anniversary, televised live and hosted by Howard Cosell.
In my lifetime, I have never known people of the character and the strength and the integrity and the belief in what they do and the caring about the people who work for them of the Rooney family and the whole of the Pittsburgh Steelers staff. They're the best there is in all the world. Please.
The Steelers continued their winning ways in 1983. Gutsy Cliff Stout replaced an injured Terry Bradshaw, and Pittsburgh clinched another division title with a late-season win over the Jets. Older veterans gradually gave way to younger players as the team's changing of the guard was in full swing.
Two tight ends! Tight eye left! Tight end off!
For 11 Hall of Fame seasons, Jack Lambert manned the middle of the steel curtain. Number 58 embodied all the qualities that made him the quintessential Steeler.
Cool your ass off!
When a freak foot injury prematurely ended Lambert's career, Mike Merriweather, number 57, took over and promptly cooled off opposing quarterbacks with 15 sacks. And number 53, Brian Hinkle, weighed in to help anchor a still formidable defense. A most formidable addition that same season hailed from southern Mississippi. The Steelers' first-round draft pick, wide receiver Louis Lips. With great hands and better moves, Lips paired with John Stallworth to account for 2,200 yards and 20 touchdowns.
I learned from a guy a long time ago by the name of John Stallworth. And whenever he wanted the ball, he made sure that he let them know that he wanted the football. If your attitude is, I know I can make the play work, call my number, and you go out there and you make it work, well then, now you have the respect and the confidence of the coach, and he's going to call it again, whether it's a critical situation or it's just a situation to make a positive play.
Lips not only became Pittsburgh's most explosive receiver, he was also their most electrifying return man.
And Lips backs up to his own 25-yard line, takes the ball, running to the left, back to the right, over the 35 to 40, stays on his feet, needs a block, over the 50 to 45, the 40 to 35, he's still going to the 20, touchdown Pittsburgh!
The runaway choice for NFL Rookie of the Year helped the Steelers to a second straight division title before starring in an upset playoff win over Denver.
And Malone fires it very sharply, and it is caught by Lips. He's fighting his way all the way down to the goal line. Touchdown, the official says. Touchdown, he says. It is a touchdown. Let's have a game. All right. From the shotgun. Elway drills it down the middle. Picked off. Taken by Williams. He's over the 25, the 20, the 15, the 10. Headed down the sideline. He's all the way to the end zone. And they say went out of bounds inside the 5-yard line. Is it to Pollard? Pollard fights. He goes into the end zone. Second effort. Frankie Pollard. Touchdown, Pittsburgh.
He turned the ball over, did some things we didn't want to do early. This team never got down. They just kept pumping and going after it, and we won the ball game. And I'll tell you, I love to be associated with these guys. They're super people.
The 1985 season held even greater promise when Mark Malone threw a personal best 5 touchdown passes in a 45-3 opening day win over the Colts. That was as good as it got. The Steelers finished with their first losing season in 14 years.
They give the ball to Pollard right through the middle, drives down to the goal line, punches it into the end zone.
But in their final home game, the Steelers still had the energy and the pride to pull off the greatest comeback in team history, rallying from 21 points down to beat Buffalo.
They're rushing him. Oh, he's in trouble.
To be sure, the rebuilding process was a painful one.
And it's a touchdown. Looks out to the right and fires to Litz on a slant. He drops.
We were losing games, close games, just by mental errors. I don't think that any Steeler team that I've been associated with has ever made that many mental errors in crucial situations in ball games that cost us ball games. They have to realize what it takes to win, and there's no easy road to it. The guys that were here in the 70s could tell you that.
As would Donnie Shell. The 5-time Pro Bowler retired in 1986 as the NFL's all-time interception leader among strong safeties. Shell left big shoes to fill, but the Steelers had a young man eager to fill them in Rod Woodson.
I played with John Stallworth and Mike Webster, and Donnie Shell was still there when I came to the Steelers. So those guys I grew up watching, and then just to talk to them, I was in awe. And Mean Joe was our coach, and I was scared of him.
Before long, it was Woodson who opponents feared most.
And down the field we come. Woodson with the ball. Woodson breaks a tackle. Woodson in front.
An incomparable athlete, Woodson was the only active defender named to the NFL's 75th anniversary team. In 1988, Rod Woodson was one of many who felt the loss of the Steelers' patriarch, Arthur J. Rooney. One of the most beloved figures in the city's history. He was a true man of the people.
You get to know people, it doesn't make any difference what their religious beliefs are, or what their color, or what their stature in life is. I mean, they're all the same to me. Everybody with me is the same. I found out that most everybody's good.
When he shook your hand, he put it in there and he let it stay in there and let you feel it. He didn't put it in and take it out. He didn't talk to you and look away and not look you in the eye. And he did that when he walked through the community, his community, talking to each and everybody.
He had so many friends and people all over, in all the things, in all different parts of life and professions. The thing that I think that my father did is bring the humanity to the game. I think that's what the National Football League needed. It may need it today.
To give you an idea what kind of a guy Art Rooney was, the morning after my father died, I went to the funeral home to make arrangements and be there for the first viewing. Art Rooney was there before I got there.
Art Rooney represented the good about people that were powerful. He was a good, powerful man. He was a good king. And people loved him, and they felt sorry for him because even in defeat, which was often, he was so generous, so gracious, so kind, that people fell in love with him.
Art Rooney. Boy, I love that man. I know you're watching, Art. I love you. You are always by me. I love you so much.
He was amazing how he knew every player. I'm talking about in training camp. And he'd make it his business to speak with all of them, some way.
Well, I really don't have a favorite when they were all favorites to me. I never had a ball player that played for me that I didn't like.
Art Rooney went from being a marginal suspect character in 1930 to being the most revered man in Pittsburgh history by the end of the 70s, and he deserved to be. People came to see themselves and see Pittsburgh through him.
Sports was my life, and I was able to have a team in the National Football League, getting all the people I met, and in the game that I certainly wouldn't have met, and it was a full life for me.
In 1988, Mike Webster departed, the last holdover from the Super Bowl era. It was a year when the Steelers crash-landed at 5-11. There were times when they simply could not stay out of each other's way.
Brister fires at two. Hodge off his fingertip, intercepted.
Fortunes fell further in 1989, when the Steelers opened the season with two of the most humiliating losses in team history. The team could have fallen off the face of the earth, but didn't.
One thing that has been characteristic of the Pittsburgh Steelers teams since I've been here is that no matter what happens, they don't panic. I think it's easy after starting off 0-2 the way we did to probably hang your head and quit, but there's no quit in anybody in this organization, and Chuck did a great job of holding things together and saying, hey, don't panic. We're not a bad football team. If we keep working hard and we continue to improve, eventually good things will happen to us.
Good things, like adding the shotgun to their repertoire. Good things, like coming from 2 touchdowns behind to beat Miami in the rain. Like a defense reborn, boasting all the traditional Steeler trademarks. Like a rookie cornerback turned safety, future All-Pro Carnell Lake.
And intercepted by Carnell Lake. Oh, what a beautiful move.
In one of the greatest turnarounds in team history, the Steelers returned to the playoffs for the first time in 5 years. Beaten twice by Houston in the regular season, the inspired Steelers scored first on a Tim Worley touchdown, and last on a Gary Anderson field goal in overtime.
This will be his longest attempt of the season. It's going to be a 50-yard race. It's going to be 50. The ball is down. Gary Anderson kicks it, sends it down. It is good, and the Steelers win it in overtime. The Steelers go on to Denver.
Good afternoon from Mile High Stadium. The Denver Broncos in the playoffs. They face an interesting stumbling block in this first game. The Pittsburgh Steelers team back from the dead to be the hottest team in the AFC right now.
Giving the ball to Hodge, and Hodge swings through there, cuts back to the left. He's still running over the 20, the 25, 30. He's going to break loose.
It marked the first time all season that the Broncos allowed a 100-yard rusher.
Hodge is kicking our ass, y'all. He's whooping our ass right now. Oh, whatever the name is. Put it in there. Put it in there. Put it in there. Put it in there.
And to give us to Hodge, look at him running out to the left. He's heading for the end zone, and a Pittsburgh touchdown.
Pittsburgh outplayed the Broncos until their lead vanished in the final minutes. From a disastrous start to within 2 points of the AFC Championship game, this was considered Chuck Noll's finest coaching effort. 2 seasons later, after 23 years, 209 wins, and 4 Super Bowl championships, the greatest coach in Steelers history stepped down.
The only thing that I can say is thank you. I mean, this is to everybody, to the city of Pittsburgh, to the coaches that I've been associated with through the years, to the players, especially the players, because those are the guys that that make it happen on the field. Those are the guys that meant our success, and it's been great memories. And after 39 years in it, I have to step back and see what the flowers smell like for a little bit.
We won championships because Chuck Noll could instill that kind of a chemistry, that kind of winning attitude we had on our football team. And, we could have gotten by without some players, but we don't win championships without Chuck Noll.
He understood not just football, but he understood life. I always liked the saying that Chuck had, that you never arrive. And at the time, what he was saying to us was, sure, you won a championship, but there are more mountains to climb, and that you never really get there. There's always more you can do. You can always get better.
It's amazing today that when I have the opportunity to go out and speak to groups and to businesses, is that so much of what I talk about and so much of what I believe in had come from Chuck Noll, had come from his philosophy on how you achieve, how you become a success. And it's so much a part of me.
So, how do you replace a legend?
It is my pleasure to introduce Coach Bill Cowher.
The Steelers chose a native son who grew up in Crafton, just 7 miles west of downtown Pittsburgh. A Carleton High School graduate, Bill Cowher has the region and its people in his heart.
Let's have some fun playing football our style. We control the tempo of this football game today. Now let's go.
Cowher's team reflected his own thunderous personality.
All day long, let's go. Relentless. Rush! Rush!
I speak from emotion, and I've always felt that being yourself, that it opens up the best lines of communication, because I think it makes everybody feel comfortable.
Hey, good job. Let's knock your ass off.
I know what we need to do. I know how we need to do it. And the thing that we have to do is surround ourselves with people who have the same common goal in obtaining what we all want to get, which is a championship.
Bill Cowher led Pittsburgh to its first AFC Central championship in 8 years. The running game was powered by Barry Foster.
20 to 50. He's hit it in. Down 5. Touchdown, Pittsburgh.
Foster set a single-season team rushing record and tied an NFL record with 1,200-yard games in a season.
The all-time NFL record set in 1984.
The defense was primed and pumped by Greg Lloyd, the heir to Jack Lambert, as a quarterback's worst nightmare.
When you go out on the field and you're intense for 60 minutes, some guys don't know how to take it. That guy across from me, he has to do one or two things. He has to raise his level of play, or he's going to get his ass kicked all day.
Greg Lloyd was a worthy successor to Pittsburgh's past and one of football's best defenders in his time. The defense went up another notch in 1994 with the addition of Kevin Green, who had the team's longest hair and the most sacks.
Back is O'Donnell. Looks to the end zone, fires, and we've got a Steeler touchdown to Ernie Mills.
With a collection of talented young receivers, the Steelers won 10 of 11 games down the stretch to capture the AFC Central title.
Steelers with that football is Andre Hastings.
That January, Pittsburgh hosted its first AFC Championship game in 15 years.
Outside motion for Mills. O'Donnell back. Fires a pass. It's caught.
And Jordan says, all you're going to get, Buster, at best is my socks, because I'm saying goodbye to you.
John L. stumbles into the end zone. The Steelers draw first blood on the touchdown. And listen to this crowd. They're on fire. Straight ahead, he's hit and racked up for no gain.
With a trip to the Super Bowl on the line, the Steelers crushed the San Diego Chargers statistically, but could not put them away. They had their chance in the closing minutes.
4th down and goal. It all rides on one play.
But with seconds remaining, from San Diego's 3-yard line, Neil O'Donnell's final pass was batted away. It was a crushing blow, one that seemed to carry over to the next season. On opening day, Rod Woodson went out with a torn ACL. And after 7 weeks, the Steelers were 3-4 with little promise for improvement.
The Steelers now have to go back to the drawing board and figure out how they're going to get back into the playoff picture.
After the 7th game, man, we did some soul searching.
This group of men have been through a lot. As the adversity comes, allow us our resolve to grow stronger.
Guys came together, and we spent a little more time in the meeting rooms and looking at a little bit more film, just doing the smaller things. And I think we came together a little bit more.
We decided that what had happened, and let's make this a 9-game season.
It's got 9 games left, baby. We got to make the best of them. That's all there is to it.
Everybody understood what their role was. They stepped it up. They became focused, and it was a belief in that, yeah, we can do this.
This is an all-day proposition.
So it became a kind of a cool confidence, or not something where you got people on television going, yeah, we bad and we know we can do this. It was just like, we know what we got to do.
Let's get nasty!
The Steelers responded with 8 straight wins and reclaimed the AFC Central Division title. Their never-give-up attitude was no surprise. The versatility of rookie Cordell Stewart was.
Cordell Stewart is in there as a wide receiver. Stewart in the slot. Cordell Stewart is the quarterback. He does it all, and only a great athlete can make it happen.
Stewart became the season's biggest sensation.
Cordell is rolling right, looking, pumping. Now he wants to throw it back, and he ducks out of there, and he's going to reverse field. He gets a block. He's running at the 10. Now he's going to throw it on the run into the end zone. Touchdown, Steelers! What a play by Cordell Stewart.
Slasher! Look like you run it before. Good job, Slash. Let's go! Put these guys away. Let's tee off, man.
The Steelers rolled into the playoffs and handed the Buffalo Bills their worst loss of the year.
The pass is caught in the end zone. A leaping grab by Ernie Mills. What a play!
A week later, Pittsburgh was again the site of the AFC Championship game.
Gets a block. Look at Cordell. Turns, looks for the end zone, fires, and it's caught in the end zone for the touchdown. Slash Stewart.
For the second straight year, the Steelers dominated their opponent everywhere but on the scoreboard. It appeared that history might repeat itself when the Colts took a fourth-quarter lead.
Oh, he went for it all.
Pittsburgh needed a big play of its own to avoid another heartbreak.
Neil O'Donnell, he put that ball right on the money, and the Steelers look like they may extend and come back from the jaws of defeat to the thrill of victory.
Give it to Bam off the right side. He's driving.
And driving into the end zone is Bam Morris for the Steeler touchdown. And this place erupts.
The place is shaking.
In one of the great playoff finishes ever, the Colts still had time to launch a final prayer.
Here we go for the right to go to the Super Bowl. Harbaugh, 5 seconds left is back. He has time and he launches a rainbow and it goes up and it's starting to come down to the end zone. And down there it is juggled and in the end zone. Oh my God! The ball hit the turf. The Steelers are headed to Phoenix, and this is one of the most unbelievable football games we have ever witnessed.
It's for you, Dan. It's for you. It's for you. You deserve it. You really did. This trophy, while it's only half of what we want to accomplish, is for Dan Rooney, and more importantly, the fans of Pittsburgh, baby. This is for you.
Thousands of those same fans followed their team to Phoenix for the Steelers' first Super Bowl in 16 seasons.
Slant pattern for the goal line. Touchdown Steelers. Pulling that ball in. It's Yancey Thigpen. And this place is on fire.
Trailing in the fourth quarter, the youngest head coach ever in a Super Bowl took a calculated risk.
Going onside here. Not leaving anything in the bag.
The Steelers try an outside kick. And they got it. And a man running with the football at the 50. And it's out of bounds on the far sideline. With that football for the Steelers is Deion Figures. How about that?
Let's go. Let's go.
Third down and goal from inches away. Again, a tight formation. They give to Bam. And Bam walks into the end zone for the Steelers touchdown off the right side.
The Steelers battled to within 3 points before one errant pass ended their hopes.
Here comes Larry Brown to the 15. He's to the 10, and he's knocked out of bounds on the far side at the Steelers' 6-yard line.
I'm sorry. We'll see you in the locker room, okay?
Sometimes you win, sometimes you lose.
Good job, Bill. Good job, Bill. Good job, Bill. Get up there.
By the next July, the Steelers had lost some players and welcomed some new ones. And the new faces coming in were embraced, as always, by the most stable organization in the NFL.
What really allowed the Steelers to continue to play well over that period of time was the continuity of the organization, top to bottom. I mean, the ownership never changed, the coach never changed, the system never changed, the philosophy never changed. Where other teams that didn't have the same continuity had their ups and their downs and their hits and their misses, the Steelers, just by being the Steelers, over a period of time were able to sustain a very high level of play.
That high level of play was enhanced when Pittsburgh acquired running back Jerome Bettis, a so-called misfit from the Rams.
When he first came here, that's all you heard, that he had an attitude problem, but I don't know, who started that rumor, but it's not true.
They said I was done, over with, finished. Wait till they get a load of me.
Sprint draw handoff, right side Bettis, and Bettis runs into the pile, and he's still on his feet, and he gets to the goal line for the touchdown. An amazing run by the bus. From the Buffalo 43, here comes the bus. He's got that head of steam. He's breaking tackles. He's still on his feet at the 30, the 25, the 20. The bus goes 43 express.
Bettis gained over 1,400 yards.
Hey, way to go. Hey, we'll keep on pounding that.
And paced Pittsburgh to its third straight division title. Bettis and quarterback, running back, receiver Cordell Stewart combined for over 2,000 total yards and 20 touchdowns.
He wants to be a quarterback. I told him that this past year was probably the best thing ever could happen for him as a player, because if he just wanted to be a quarterback and didn't want to do anything else, you wouldn't have heard of Cordell Stewart. He makes a lot of things happen for this offense when he gets in there. You don't know, this guy's going to run the ball? Is he going to drop back and throw the ball? Is he going to run the little option thing? Is he going to try to run the option, fake back and pass?
The 40, there goes Slash up the left sideline.
By 1997, Stewart was fully prepared to assume the starting role.
I just feel I have that winning desire in my heart. I hate losing games. It's just a matter of me just getting out there if I am the starter, just taking it game by game, doing what I can do, not trying to do more than what I can. Now I just have to take what they give me and just be patient.
Stewart proved himself by passing for over 3,000 yards and 21 touchdowns, while directing numerous dramatic finishes.
Cordell under center. He's going to throw it. He's back. He lofts it. A man is open. And the pass is caught for the Steeler touchdown.
5 times the Steelers came from 10 points behind to win, stretching themselves to new limits to win their 4th straight division title.
Big time players make big time plays. 9:30 left in overtime. Cordell back, shovel pass, forward. Steelers have it. Bus goes all the way. Game over. Touchdown Steelers. and the Steelers are 6-0 at Three Rivers in overtime.
This team never gives up, do they?
You the man, baby. Wow, dog. You the man. You made it happen. Hey, way to save me, baby.
They get nothing right now, baby. Put it on the line for your brother. Here we go. Let's do it.
After 6 straight playoff berths and 3 AFC Championship appearances under coach Bill Cowher, hopes were high for the 1998 Steelers. They won 7 of their first 11 games before coin toss confusion in overtime signaled a downward slide.
Who will call it from Pittsburgh? Number 36, heads, tails, tails, heads. Call it plays in the air. Heads is the call. He said heads, it is a tails.
Well, he said tails.
Bettis called tails, and he said to the guy, I called tails.
He did call tails.
And
we heard it. Man,
I mean, to tell you, that is weird.
The officials' blunder derailed a promising season.
That kick is long, high, and good, and the Steelers' playoff hopes are in deep jeopardy.
They dropped their final 4 games and missed the postseason for the first time under Cowher.
We were right on the edge, you know, and then we went into kind of a skid, and we lost the edge, and we really could never gain it back. You know, I think it's important that we take that experience, learn from it, build from it, and use it almost as a motivating tool as we enter into the year 1999.
Cowher's optimism went unrealized as the team deflated for the 2nd straight season.
This was like a big helium balloon, and the helium just left.
In 2000, Pittsburgh rebounded with 9 wins, the most memorable coming in the last game ever played at Three Rivers Stadium. After 30 years and countless memories, the Steelers' home was emptied one last time, then stripped clean for demolition. Despite a -8-degree wind chill, thousands of Steelers fans gathered for one last glimpse of an old friend.
When you grow up in this area, grow up like I was in the 60s and 70s, you understand how great it is. Sorry for about that. I'm a little bit emotional right now.
I'm extremely disappointed because it was 3 seconds and 35 years of history was gone.
Three Rivers Stadium was laid to rest on February 11th, 2001. From the rubble of Three Rivers rose Heinz Field, the Steelers' home for the 21st century. The $260 million facility was the toast of the NFL.
This is a nice place.
Oh, it's a good place.
Wow.
It really is.
It probably gets loud down here, huh?
Yeah.
Looks like, yeah.
It gets loud down at that end, too. That's like our one end, yeah. That's why we put you guys down there to get you warmed up.
With their new home came a revitalized Cordell Stewart. The energized quarterback ignited the Steelers. They rolled to their best record since 1978 and first playoff berth in 4 years.
Cordell Stewart has gone from a question mark to the Pro Bowl to MVP to status as a first-rate NFL quarterback.
That's how to make a play. Wow, the tables have turned. Hey, keep it going, though. You are the secret weapon, I'm telling you. But guess what? You ain't no secret no more.
It was no secret that Baltimore's trash-talking Ravens had little respect for the Steelers' #1 ranked defense.
Let me tell you something. They said they wanted us. Well, they're going to get us for 60 minutes. We're in our house. Let's set the tempo early. Let's get after them, guys. Let's go. Let's go.
The Steelers manhandled the defending Super Bowl champions, proving the NFL's best defense played in Steel Town.
Ain't no move right in the defense. It's Steelers.
Throws for the goal line. It's juggled and intercepted by Trent Alexander.
One thing I love about you guys is it's a team. It's a freaking team. And we won this thing today as a team. And you sent the defending champions home.
In a battle for the AFC title, Pittsburgh's season ended with a loss to the eventual Super Bowl champion Patriots. The Steelers' missed opportunity opened the door for an unexpected hero in 2002. A first-round pick by Denver a decade earlier, Tommy Maddox had a discouraging start in the NFL and retired to the business world.
After selling insurance for 2 years, I was sitting in a meeting with a bunch of other agents, and our manager was up there talking, and I didn't hear a word he said the whole meeting. I was looking around at all these guys and thought, man, I don't want to be doing this.
All right, touchdown, Tommy. Go to work.
At age 31, Maddox started an NFL game for the first time in 10 years. He transformed the Steelers' offense as they set a new club record for passing yards in a season.
Back is Maddox. Throws it down the left sideline. Caught in the end zone by Plaxico Burress.
Maddox became a star in a city defined by hard workers and embodied by teammate Hines Ward.
He plays receiver like he's a linebacker. He does the things that you want as a coach your team to exemplify.
I tell you what, Hines Ward is tough as nails.
He takes as much satisfaction with a good block as he does with making a catch.
If his blocks were good, his catches often defied description.
Hines Ward ain't never going to drop a ball the rest of his life. If he can lay his 10 fingers on that ball, or even 7, you got yourself a catch.
Ward's blue-collar ethic blended well with the black and blue style of linebacker Joey Porter.
Get in the back. He's going to be hit. He's going to lose the football, and the Steelers grab it out of the air.
Pittsburgh's 36 takeaways led the NFL in 2002 and lifted them into the playoffs. But in the AFC wildcard game, a slow Steelers start left fans stunned.
I don't think there was ever any sense of panic. I just remember looking up, being down 24-7 in the third quarter, and realized the only good thing is there was a lot of football left to be played.
The NFL's comeback player of the year lived up to his billing.
Blue, 20, and
Play action fake. Maddox looking, pumping, rolling right, throwing from the back of the end zone. It's caught in the back of the end zone for a Pittsburgh Steelers touchdown.
Maddox continued finding ways to hit his targets.
Tommy Maddox had to throw that football in there. And we've got a ball game.
With under 3 minutes remaining, Maddox drove Pittsburgh within 3 yards of the greatest playoff comeback in team history.
They trail 33-28. Draw a handoff and Foose into the end zone for the Pittsburgh Steelers touchdown.
It is all over in Pittsburgh. That's how you come back, baby.
It was amazing, and to feel the energy at Heinz Field. I mean, I think that was the first time that Heinz Field felt like Three River Stadium.
And this place is on fire. Heinz Field, terrible towel twirling.
But the magic of the comeback did not carry over into 2003, as the team lost 10 games. The Steelers needed some new blood, and they found it on draft day.
With the 11th pick in the 2004 NFL Draft, the Pittsburgh Steelers select Ben Roethlisberger, quarterback, University of Miami, Ohio.
Ben Roethlisberger won Rookie of the Year honors with the most successful season ever by a first-year quarterback. Big Ben rang true, winning all 12 of his regular season starts.
I'm telling you, that was a terrific play by Big Ben.
I think that's when everybody said, this kid is for real. I said, oh, okay, yeah, he's special. We're on our way.
In back-to-back games, the Steelers beat both of the year's Super Bowl participants. The following Sunday, they crushed the eventual NFC champions.
Wow, what a game. What a thorough butt whooping. 2 weeks in a row, 2 undefeated teams.
A lot of guts in here, man. That was a gutsy effort and a lot of heart in this football team. You're strong. You're real strong.
Jerome Bettis' strength was his commitment. He took a pay cut to stay in Pittsburgh and accepted a reduced role in the offense. But it wasn't long before he was once again the leading man.
Don't tell me that the bus has lost a step.
With a Super Bowl berth in their sights, the Steelers' magical season ended with a loss to the eventual world champion Patriots. Though they fell short of a championship in 2004, the Steelers proved they have the pieces in place for many more years of success. Throughout their history, the Pittsburgh Steelers have been a model of stability. One ownership, one city, one philosophy. For more than 70 years, the Steelers' identity has reflected the city of Pittsburgh and the Rooney family.
Maybe the tradition that my grandfather and my father sort of taught me about was the relationship with the people in the game, and particularly the players.
Understanding what the tradition of the Rooney family in Pittsburgh, their sense of giving and community, made me work hard at giving and giving back.
There is a great history and tradition. I know that Bill Cowher really makes a big thing of it with the young players.
We're an extension of this city. We're an extension of the fan that comes out here and watches us play on Sunday. When you play us, you're going to play us for 60 minutes.
For 60 minutes, let's go after him. Deliver the first and last punch.
We try to make sure that people understand how we play the game. It's a physical approach to the game.
Just like any heavyweight fight, someone's got to throw the first punch.
It's a blue-collar approach to the game.
You run like you know how to run.
We think that's what typifies the Pittsburgh Steelers and the city of Pittsburgh.
Great day for football today, baby.
Live it, love it, enjoy yourself on the greatest moments in your life, fellas.
And it's great to be a part of that. I mean, you can feel it. The crowd's into it.
Come on, man! Come on! Let's crank it!
Listen to this crowd. They're on fire.
Pittsburgh is a close community. It's tight. And they do get involved with this football team. We belong to them. That's my Pittsburgh Steeler right there.
I realize that the fans and my Dover Shuka fan club up here on the right, you people were a great part of why we were a championship team for so many years.
Certainly the city of Pittsburgh and the way that whole city sort of came together with that football team, a certain amount of pride that came from the Pittsburgh Steelers from Pittsburgh, that dirty little town in western Pennsylvania. And all of a sudden we're world champions. So, that whole attitude, I think, changed. And we went from going to the Super Bowl as a place to be as to going to the Super Bowl. That's what we are. We are champions.
The greatest time of my life was being out on that field and playing. You have no idea. No one does. What it's like to stand there and hear that crowd going crazy, man, it's nothing like it.
Gives it to Franco straight through the middle. Franco Harris runs over people going through the middle. Carries it in for the touchdown.
When I look back to my 12 years with the Pittsburgh Steelers, I say, wow, it was great. With great guys, great coaches, great times, and to me, that's what it's all about.
How fortunate I was to play for the Pittsburgh Steelers fans. A proud and hard-working people that love their football and their players. If I could start my life all over again, I would be a professional football player, and you damn well better believe I'd be a Pittsburgh Steeler.